Some people mistake silence for weakness until the day it saves their lives. Nathan Brooks lowered his eyes as another employee laughed while handing him a mop. "Careful, janitor." The young accountant joked loudly enough for half the lobby to hear. "Do not polish the marble too well. The executives might start seeing their reflections." A few people chuckled before returning to their conversations. Nathan simply nodded with a quiet smile and continued pushing the mop across the polished floor. He had heard worse words in deserts where bullets replaced sarcasm, but no one inside Montgomery Dynamics knew that. To them, he was only a 40-year-old single father wearing a faded maintenance uniform and carrying a bucket instead of a briefcase. Every morning before sunrise, Nathan unlocked the service entrance, checked the heating system, emptied overflowing trash bins, and made certain every hallway looked perfect before hundreds of employees arrived. His work was invisible, which suited him just fine. Invisible people were rarely questioned. Invisible people noticed everything. Before beginning his shift, Nathan always stopped outside Lincoln Elementary to watch his 10-year-old daughter, Lily Brooks, disappear safely through the front doors with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She always turned around one last time, waving with the same bright smile that reminded him why every difficult day was worth enduring. "Have a good day, Dad." "You too, sweetheart." Those 4 words were enough to carry him through another shift. Inside Montgomery Dynamics, the atmosphere could not have been more different. Expensive suits moved quickly through the marble lobby while assistants hurried behind them carrying tablets and coffee cups. Conversations revolved around mergers, stock prices, and billion-dollar contracts. Nathan quietly cleaned fingerprints from the glass entrance without interrupting anyone's important morning. On the top floor, Claire Montgomery stood before a conference room filled with directors and investors. At 37 years old, she had become one of the youngest technology CEOs in the country, respected for her intelligence and feared for her impossible standards. She spoke with calm confidence while outlining the company's next expansion, but beneath her composed expression rested the exhaustion of someone who had forgotten what an ordinary day felt like. When the meeting ended, she chose the staircase instead of the elevator, hoping for a few peaceful minutes before the next decision demanded her attention. As she reached the main lobby, a distracted executive rushed around the corner while reading messages on his phone. His shoulder slammed into a maintenance cart, sending a bucket of soapy water across the polished marble floor. Claire instinctively stepped forward, her high heels sliding on the wet surface. Before anyone could react, a strong hand steadied her arm without pulling or startling her. Nathan calmly shifted his footing, keeping both of them balanced until she regained control. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Claire looked at him for only a moment before straightening her jacket. "Yes, thank you." The executive barely glanced back. Maintenance should keep these carts out of the way. Without waiting for an answer, he disappeared toward the elevators. Nathan quietly picked up the overturned bucket. "My fault," he said, although everyone nearby had witnessed exactly what happened. Claire paused as though she wanted to say something more, but another assistant called her name. She walked away, never noticing that Nathan's eyes briefly scanned every entrance, every security camera, and every unfamiliar face crossing the lobby. It lasted less than 2 seconds before he returned to mopping the floor. No one noticed the habit. No one wondered why an ordinary janitor observed a building the way a soldier secured a battlefield. And no one could have imagined that the man quietly cleaning beneath their feet had once led missions where noticing one unfamiliar face meant the difference between bringing everyone home or leaving someone behind. Nathan Brooks quickly discovered that polished marble floors reflected far more than expensive shoes. They reflected pride, impatience, loneliness, and sometimes fear. Every morning he arrived before the first executive entered the building, quietly replacing burned-out light bulbs, wiping fingerprints from glass doors, and making certain every hallway looked flawless long before anyone noticed. Most employees walked past him without making eye contact. Some greeted him politely. Others barely acknowledged that he existed. Nathan accepted every reaction with the same calm expression because he had long ago learned that a person's character often revealed itself by how they treated someone who could do nothing for them. After finishing his morning shift, he drove across town to pick up Lily from school. She climbed into his old pickup truck carrying a science project carefully balanced in both hands. "I got an A," she announced proudly before fastening her seatbelt. Nathan smiled with genuine pride. "I never doubted you for a second." Lily looked at him with curious eyes. "Did anyone make your day difficult again?" Nathan laughed softly. "Only the coffee machine." She knew he was protecting her from unnecessary worries, but she also knew her father well enough not to press further. That evening they shared homemade chili, completed homework together at the kitchen table, and ended the night reading another chapter from Lily's favorite adventure novel. Their little house was modest, but every room carried something far more valuable than luxury. It carried peace. The following morning, Montgomery Dynamics prepared to welcome a group of international investors. Employees rushed through the lobby carrying presentation folders while assistants adjusted floral arrangements and digital displays. Nathan quietly noticed that one emergency exit had been blocked by decorative shipping crates delivered overnight. Without saying a word, he moved every crate to its proper storage area before anyone arrived. Minutes later, the fire inspector unexpectedly visited for a routine compliance review. The building passed without a single citation. Nobody connected the successful inspection to the quiet janitor who had spent 15 minutes moving heavy boxes before sunrise. Upstairs, Claire Montgomery concluded another demanding executive meeting. One director praised rising profits while another warned about increasingly aggressive competitors attempting to pressure the company into unfavorable partnerships. Claire listened carefully, but sensed that something beneath the surface had begun to change. Too many confidential discussions seemed to become public. Too many business decisions leaked beyond the boardroom. She trusted her leadership team, yet an uncomfortable feeling refused to disappear. During lunch, Claire stepped outside onto a quiet courtyard behind the headquarters, hoping to clear her thoughts. As she reached a shaded bench, she noticed Nathan kneeling beside a small flower bed repairing a damaged irrigation pipe. His uniform sleeves were rolled to his forearms, and his hands were stained with dirt rather than office ink. A tiny sparrow struggled near the edge of the pathway, with one wing caught beneath loose garden netting left behind by landscapers. Nathan gently set down his tools, carefully freed the frightened bird without rushing, and waited patiently until it regained enough strength to fly away. He smiled as the little bird disappeared into the trees before returning to repair the broken pipe, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Claire watched the quiet moment from several yards away without interrupting. There was something unusual about the way he moved. Every action appeared deliberate, controlled, and disciplined, never wasted, never hurried. He carried himself with the calm awareness of someone who always noticed far more than he revealed. Nathan eventually stood, gathered his equipment, and politely nodded when he realized Claire had been watching. "Good afternoon, Ms. Montgomery." "Good afternoon, Nathan." It was the first time she had spoken his name. As he walked back toward the maintenance entrance, Claire remained standing beneath the trees, quietly wondering why an ordinary janitor carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had already survived storms most people could never imagine. Nathan continued his routine as though nothing around him had changed, but his instincts refused to relax. Experience had taught him that danger rarely announced itself with loud voices. It usually arrived disguised as ordinary moments that everyone else ignored. During the next several days, he noticed unfamiliar delivery vans parking across the street longer than necessary, visitors asking unusual questions about executive schedules, and maintenance access doors left unlocked by people who claimed they had simply forgotten. Each event seemed harmless by itself, yet together they formed a pattern that only someone trained to recognize subtle changes could appreciate. Nathan quietly corrected every small problem without drawing attention to himself. He secured doors, reported broken security lights through normal maintenance channels, and made certain emergency exits remained completely accessible. Every action looked like nothing more than a conscientious janitor taking pride in his work. Inside the executive offices, Claire Montgomery faced growing pressure from investors demanding faster expansion and higher profits. During another board meeting, one senior executive insisted that recent information leaks were probably harmless coincidences. Claire listened politely, but remained unconvinced. Her instincts told her that someone was carefully studying the company from the outside, waiting for exactly the right opportunity. She dismissed the meeting with a calm smile, yet the uneasy feeling followed her into the hallway. Later that afternoon, Nathan was replacing air filters near the executive floor when he noticed a man wearing an expensive business suit standing alone beside a restricted hallway. The visitor appeared confident, but his eyes were not admiring the architecture or checking his phone like everyone else. Instead, they quietly measured security cameras, employee entrances, and elevator timing. When the man noticed Nathan approaching with his maintenance card, he immediately smiled. "Can you tell me where the executive conference room is?" Nathan returned the smile with equal politeness. "Visitors need an employee escort beyond this point, sir. The reception desk downstairs will be happy to help." The man thanked him and walked toward the elevator without another word. Nathan watched the elevator doors close before calmly taking out his maintenance checklist. He wrote nothing unusual because there was nothing he could prove. Suspicion without evidence solved nothing. That evening, Nathan arrived at Lily's school auditorium for her science club presentation. She spotted him immediately and waved excitedly from the stage. While other parents discussed careers, promotions, and investments, Nathan listened with complete attention as Lily explained her simple project about clean energy. When she finished, she searched the audience until she found her father's proud smile. To her, that smile mattered more than any trophy. On the drive home, she asked, "Do you ever miss your old job?" Nathan kept his eyes on the road for several quiet seconds. "Sometimes I miss the people. I do not miss the reasons we had to be there." Lily accepted the answer without asking more. She had learned that some chapters of her father's life remained gently closed, not because he was hiding from them, but because he wanted her childhood to be filled with hope instead of heavy memories. The next morning, Montgomery Dynamics prepared for its annual Innovation Partnership Summit, an event that would bring influential business leaders, investors, and government officials into the headquarters within 48 hours. Decorations filled the lobby, technicians tested presentation equipment, and security teams focused on welcoming distinguished guests. As Nathan emptied a recycling bin near the loading dock, he discovered a laminated visitor badge hidden beneath discarded packing material. It carried no photograph, no employee name, and no department assignment, only a professionally printed access barcode that should never have existed. Nathan quietly slipped the badge into his pocket, his expression never changing as employees hurried past him. Somewhere inside the building, someone had created a key that opened doors it never should have reached, and Nathan knew with quiet certainty that the peaceful routine everyone enjoyed was about to be tested. Nathan slipped the unauthorized access badge into a small compartment inside his maintenance card and continued replacing hallway light fixtures as though he had discovered nothing unusual. Years earlier, he had learned that reacting too quickly often revealed more than remaining patient. Whoever had created the badge believed the plan remained invisible, and Nathan intended to keep it that way until he understood the full picture. Throughout the day, he quietly compared the badge to legitimate employee credentials whenever someone passed through secured doors. The printing quality was nearly identical, but one tiny detail stood out. The barcode color reflected light differently from every authentic company badge. It was a small flaw that almost nobody would notice, yet it confirmed that someone outside the organization had gone to great lengths to imitate the company's security system. Upstairs, Claire Montgomery welcomed partners arriving for the Innovation Partnership Summit. She greeted investors with confidence, answered difficult questions about future expansion, and never allowed the growing pressure to appear on her face. The company represented years of sacrifice by thousands of employees, and she refused to let uncertainty weaken their confidence. Still, each time she glanced through the conference room windows toward the city below, she felt as though unseen eyes were watching every decision she made. During a short break between meetings, Claire walked through the lobby carrying several presentation folders. She noticed Nathan repairing a decorative light fixture above the reception desk with the same steady concentration he brought to every assignment. A receptionist smiled at him. "You always seem to fix things before anyone even notices they are broken." Nathan climbed down carefully and returned the screwdriver to his tool belt. "Life is easier when little problems stay little." Claire overheard the quiet reply as she continued walking, but the simple sentence lingered in her thoughts far longer than she expected. Later that afternoon, an expensive delivery arrived addressed to the executive floor. The courier appeared impatient, insisting that the package required immediate personal delivery despite normal security procedures. Nathan happened to be cleaning nearby, when he noticed the shipping label displayed the correct company name, but the wrong building number. It was only a single digit different, easy enough for anyone to overlook during a busy day. Nathan politely stopped the courier. "I think there may be a mistake on the paperwork." The courier frowned before quickly checking the label himself. "You are right. I must have grabbed the wrong package." He thanked Nathan and hurried away. The receptionist smiled. "Good catch." Nathan simply nodded and returned to polishing the lobby floor, although something about the man's hurried departure did not feel accidental. That evening, Claire stayed late preparing for the opening ceremony scheduled the following morning. Nearly every employee had gone home, leaving only a handful of custodians, security officers, and maintenance staff inside the massive headquarters. As Claire exited the conference room carrying her laptop, the overhead lights suddenly flickered before the backup system activated. The brief interruption lasted only seconds, but it interrupted every security monitor inside the building. Technicians immediately reported that everything had returned to normal. Everyone accepted the explanation except Nathan. While inspecting an electrical panel in the basement, he quietly noticed fresh scratches around a locked maintenance cabinet that nobody had authorized to open. The damage was subtle, almost invisible beneath fresh paint, but it had not been there the previous evening. Nathan carefully photographed the marks with his old phone before locking the cabinet again exactly as he had found it. He reported a routine maintenance concern through official channels without mentioning his suspicions. As he pushed his empty cart toward the service elevator, he looked once across the silent lobby where Claire stood alone reviewing tomorrow's schedule beneath the glowing company logo. She had no idea that several ordinary mistakes had formed an extraordinary pattern, and Nathan understood with growing certainty that when the summit doors opened the next morning, the greatest challenge facing Montgomery Dynamics would not be the presentations inside the boardroom, but the hidden intentions already waiting beyond its front doors. Nathan arrived before dawn as he always did, parking his aging pickup beneath the same flickering streetlight while the city remained wrapped in quiet darkness. The Innovation Partnership Summit would officially begin in less than 2 hours, and the headquarters already hummed with unusual energy. Caterers rolled polished carts through the lobby, technicians performed final sound checks, and security officers welcomed early vendors carrying carefully labeled equipment. To everyone else, it looked like the beginning of another successful corporate event. To Nathan, the rhythm felt slightly off. Small details refused to fit together. A security guard he had never seen before stood near the east entrance wearing a perfectly pressed uniform with brand new boots that showed no signs of daily use. Another contractor repeatedly checked the same storage room despite claiming he had finished his work 20 minutes earlier. Nathan greeted each person with the same polite smile while quietly memorizing faces, movements, and routines. Nobody paid much attention to the janitor pushing a mop across the marble floor. Claire Montgomery entered the lobby wearing a navy business suit that reflected confidence even though she had barely slept the previous night. She stopped beside the reception desk to welcome several investors arriving from New York and Chicago, thanking each guest personally before guiding them toward the conference hall. Employees admired her composure, unaware that she continued carrying the growing weight of unanswered questions about the recent security concerns. As she crossed the lobby, she noticed Nathan replacing fresh flowers that had accidentally tipped over near the entrance. "You always seem to be exactly where you are needed," she said with a gentle smile. Nathan looked up. Sometimes the smallest details keep everything else standing. Claire smiled politely before continuing toward another meeting, but his words lingered once again in her thoughts. Minutes later, an unexpected maintenance alert appeared on the building operations screen, reporting a temporary malfunction in one section of the ventilation system near the executive conference level. Building engineers immediately prepared to investigate, but Nathan quietly studied the display before speaking. The sensors are showing 3 different readings at the same time. That usually means the problem is not inside the ventilation system. The chief engineer frowned. "How can you tell?" Nathan calmly pointed toward the monitor. "Those sensors do not fail in opposite directions together unless something interrupted the network before the equipment." Curious, the engineer checked the central control panel instead of climbing toward the rooftop units. Within minutes, he discovered that a communications cable had been partially disconnected inside a secured utility cabinet. It took only moments to restore the connection, preventing a complete shutdown that would have delayed the summit. Good observation, the engineer admitted. You saved us at least an hour. Nathan simply nodded and returned to collecting empty coffee cups before anyone else noticed. Across the room, Claire watched the exchange from a distance. Once again, the quiet janitor had recognized a problem before trained specialists did. It was becoming impossible to dismiss these moments as coincidence. During the opening presentation, hundreds of guests filled the auditorium while live broadcasts connected offices across the country. Nathan remained outside in the service corridor, inspecting emergency lighting according to his normal schedule. As applause echoed through the building, he noticed one emergency exit door resting slightly open even though its automatic lock indicator displayed green. He gently closed the door, tested the latch twice, and silently repositioned a decorative display that had partially blocked the evacuation route. Nobody thanked him because nobody realized anything had been wrong. As he turned away, his eyes settled on a reflection inside the polished glass wall across the corridor. A familiar face from earlier in the week briefly appeared at the far end of the hallway before disappearing around a corner reserved for authorized personnel. Nathan did not chase him. Instead, he quietly reached for the maintenance radio clipped to his belt, his calm expression unchanged, because he knew the moment he had been patiently preparing for had finally begun. Nathan pressed the maintenance radio once without speaking, using the silent signal that alerted building operations to inspect the east corridor without creating unnecessary concern. He continued pushing his cart at the same steady pace, never looking hurried, never looking afraid. The familiar face he had noticed disappeared beyond a secured doorway, but Nathan had already memorized enough. Whoever was inside the building understood security procedures well enough to avoid attention, yet not well enough to recognize that the quiet janitor had been observing every unusual movement for an entire week. Inside the auditorium, Claire Montgomery welcomed hundreds of guests to the Innovation Partnership Summit. Her opening remarks focused on innovation, trust, and creating technology that improved everyday lives. The audience responded with warm applause while cameras broadcast the event across the country. Everything appeared flawless, exactly as months of preparation had promised. Behind the scenes, however, the atmosphere slowly shifted. Several employees reported temporary interruptions with digital visitor registrations, while reception staff noticed that one scheduled guest had never officially checked into the building despite appearing on internal attendance records. The discrepancies seemed minor, but together they created quiet confusion among the security team. Nathan reached the operations office carrying a replacement box of air filters. The supervisor looked up with relief. You were right again. Someone attempted to access the network cabinet using an unauthorized credential. The system rejected it before anything happened. Nathan nodded calmly. Did the cameras capture the person clearly? The supervisor sighed. Only partial images. Whoever it was avoided every direct angle. Nathan studied the monitor for a few seconds before noticing something everyone else had overlooked. The individual always walked just outside the center of each camera frame, suggesting careful planning rather than coincidence. He said nothing more because speculation without proof would only distract the team. Instead, he quietly recommended that 2 maintenance hallways remain locked until the summit concluded. The supervisor accepted the suggestion immediately, assuming it came from simple building experience. Meanwhile, Claire stepped away from the main conference hall for a brief meeting with several investors interested in expanding the company's research division. During the discussion, one executive assistant suddenly informed her that confidential presentation files had briefly appeared on an external server before disappearing again. The information technology department insisted that no permanent breach had occurred, but Claire could no longer ignore the pattern surrounding the company. She excused herself for a moment and walked toward the lobby, hoping to gather her thoughts. There she found Nathan carefully straightening chairs after a networking session had ended. "May I ask you something?" she said quietly. Nathan looked up with the same respectful expression he always carried. "Of course." Claire hesitated before speaking. "Have you ever had the feeling that something was wrong even when you could not explain why?" Nathan rested both hands on the handle of his maintenance cart. "Yes. Sometimes experience notices the truth before the mind finds the evidence." Claire lowered her eyes thoughtfully. "That is exactly how I feel today. Nathan offered only a gentle smile. Then trust yourself enough to stay alert. Before she could ask another question, one of her directors hurried over requesting her presence inside the executive lounge. She thanked Nathan and walked away, unaware that his eyes briefly followed every person entering the restricted hallway behind her. Minutes later, building security quietly confirmed that another counterfeit visitor badge had been discovered near a service elevator. The discovery remained confidential to avoid alarming the guests, but Nathan understood its meaning immediately. One fake badge could be dismissed as an isolated attempt. Two fake badges meant someone was testing the building from the inside. As afternoon sunlight reflected across the polished marble floors, Nathan adjusted the small American flag pin hidden inside his wallet, a quiet reminder of promises made long before he became a janitor. He closed the wallet, picked up his mop once again, and returned to work, knowing that the greatest protection often came from the person everyone believed was simply cleaning the floor. Nathan finished locking the final maintenance hallway just as the afternoon sessions transitioned into private executive meetings. The headquarters remained filled with confident conversations, polished presentations, and polite applause, yet beneath the calm surface another rhythm had begun. Security officers quietly exchanged short radio updates more frequently than before. Information technology specialists monitored unusual login attempts that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. No single incident justified panic, but together they painted a picture that Nathan recognized all too well. Someone was patiently waiting for the perfect moment. He continued moving through the building with his maintenance cart, replacing trash liners and collecting empty coffee cups exactly as everyone expected. The disguise remained far more powerful than any uniform he had ever worn because nobody questioned the presence of a janitor. As he entered a service corridor near the executive lounge, he noticed an unfamiliar man speaking into a wireless earpiece before abruptly ending the conversation when footsteps approached. The man smiled politely. "Busy day?" Nathan returned the smile. "They usually are." Without another word, both continued walking in opposite directions, but Nathan quietly observed the reflection in a nearby glass panel. The stranger looked back twice before disappearing around the corner. That single habit confirmed what instinct had already whispered. Calm professionals rarely look behind themselves unless they expected someone to notice them. Upstairs, Claire concluded a meeting with several international partners who praised her leadership despite the increasingly competitive market. One investor privately warned that rival corporations had become unusually aggressive during recent negotiations. Claire thanked him for the advice, but the conversation left another weight on her already crowded thoughts. As she stepped into the hallway, she found Nathan adjusting a loose ceiling tile outside the conference room. "You seem to appear whenever I need a quiet moment," she said with a tired smile. Nathan climbed down carefully from the ladder. "Sometimes quiet moments find us before difficult ones do." Claire studied him for a second. "You always answer simple questions with complicated wisdom." Nathan smiled gently. "Life usually teaches the complicated part first." Before Claire could respond, one of her assistants hurried over to announce the arrival of a federal cybersecurity advisor who had been invited to deliver a keynote address. The advisor entered the executive lounge accompanied by two security officials. As he scanned the room, his eyes unexpectedly settled on Nathan across the hallway. For a brief second, the older man's composed expression changed into unmistakable surprise. He excused himself from the group and walked directly toward the maintenance cart. Nathan recognized him immediately. It was retired Navy Captain Daniel Mercer, a former Special Operations commander whom Nathan had not seen in almost 8 years. The captain stopped only a few feet away, his eyes filled with disbelief before quiet respect replaced the surprise. "Brooks?" he asked softly. Nathan gave an almost invisible nod. "Good afternoon, Captain." Mercer smiled warmly before extending his hand without hesitation. "I never thought I would find you here." Several executives nearby paused their conversations, curious why an accomplished military leader appeared so pleased to greet a building janitor. Claire watched from only a few yards away. Captain Mercer shook Nathan's hand firmly and lowered his voice, though not enough to escape the silence gathering around them. "The country still remembers what your team accomplished. There are people alive today because you never abandoned your mission." Nathan answered with complete humility. "Many better men deserve that credit too." Mercer slowly nodded. That sounds exactly like you. The hallway grew unusually quiet. Executives who had ignored Nathan for weeks suddenly looked at him with entirely different eyes. Claire stood motionless, trying to reconcile the gentle janitor who quietly repaired lights and rescued injured birds with the calm respect reflected in Captain Mercer's voice. No medals were displayed. No dramatic stories were told. Yet the dignity exchanged between the two men carried the unmistakable weight of a shared history that could never be purchased, exaggerated, or forgot. Captain Daniel Mercer released Nathan's hand with the same quiet respect that filled the silent hallway. No one spoke for several long seconds. Executives who had spent weeks walking past the maintenance cart now looked at the man behind it as though they were seeing him for the very first time. Nathan simply picked up his mop and returned to work. He neither confirmed nor denied anything further. The attention made him uncomfortable because he had never served for recognition. Claire remained standing near the conference room entrance, watching him disappear down the corridor with the same calm stride he had carried every day since joining Montgomery Dynamics. The revelation answered one question, but created dozens more. Why would a man with such an extraordinary past choose to clean office floors? Why had he never mentioned his service? Most importantly, what had he already noticed that everyone else had failed to see? The afternoon sessions resumed, yet Claire found herself paying less attention to financial forecasts and more attention to the unusual feeling that Nathan had quietly protected the company long before anyone appreciated it. During the final executive panel, the information technology director interrupted with an urgent but controlled update. An unauthorized attempt had been made to enter the company's secure research database through a temporary access credential. The attempt failed because the credential had already been deactivated after security personnel discovered the counterfeit badges earlier that day. Relief spread through the room. One director proudly credited the cybersecurity software. Nathan happened to be replacing a water dispenser outside the meeting room when he overheard the conversation. He quietly knocked on the open door. "Excuse me, Ms. Montgomery." Claire invited him inside without hesitation. Nathan spoke calmly. If someone tested one method and failed, they may already have another plan. It would be wise to review physical access to the research wing before people begin leaving this evening. Several executives exchanged doubtful glances. One senior vice president folded his arms. With respect, building security decisions should probably remain with trained professionals. Before Nathan could respond, Captain Mercer calmly stepped forward. "You are looking at one of the finest professionals I have ever known." The room became silent once again. Mercer continued with measured confidence. "When Nathan Brooks says something deserves attention, I recommend listening before asking for credentials." Claire looked from Mercer to Nathan and made her decision immediately. "Please inspect the research wing together with security. I would rather be overly careful than regret ignoring good advice." Nathan simply nodded. Minutes later, while walking through the research corridor with two security supervisors, he noticed something almost invisible. A decorative display celebrating the company's newest technology had been moved less than 6 inches from its original position. To most people, it meant absolutely nothing. Nathan crouched beside the display and pointed toward faint scratches on the polished floor beneath its base. This display was repositioned recently. One supervisor checked the maintenance records. It has not been scheduled for movement in over 3 months. They carefully rolled the display aside and immediately discovered a concealed floor access panel that had been left partially unlatched during recent construction work. The opening did not expose confidential information, but it created an unnoticed pathway connecting maintenance tunnels to the restricted research corridor. Security officers immediately secured the area and updated every access route before evening guests began leaving the building. The supervisors thanked Nathan repeatedly, realizing how easily the hidden vulnerability could have been overlooked. Claire arrived moments later after receiving the report. She stared at the concealed access panel before turning toward Nathan. "You noticed this because the display moved a few inches?" Nathan smiled gently. "Small changes often tell the biggest stories." Claire lowered her eyes, humbled by the realization that while everyone else had trusted expensive systems and impressive titles, the person who had quietly protected the company from the very beginning had been the man carrying a mop instead of a briefcase. proving once again that true strength rarely announced itself before it became absolutely necessary. The Innovation Partnership Summit concluded without disruption, and most guests left believing they had simply attended another successful corporate event. They never realized how many quiet decisions had protected that ordinary day from becoming something very different. The following morning, Claire Montgomery invited Nathan Brooks to her office before the building opened. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows as the city slowly awakened below. Nathan entered wearing the same neatly pressed maintenance uniform he had worn every day, carrying a toolbox because he had planned to repair a cabinet on the executive floor before beginning his regular assignments. Claire stood from her desk with a warm smile that carried both gratitude and humility. "Please have a seat." Nathan gently shook his head. "I am more comfortable standing." Claire respected his choice. "Then allow me to say something I should have said much sooner. Thank you, not only for what happened yesterday, but for every quiet moment before that. You protected this company long before anyone understood what you were doing." Nathan answered softly, "I only did the job that was in front of me." Claire smiled. "That is exactly what makes it extraordinary." She placed a small wooden box on her desk. Inside rested a company service medal created to honor employees whose actions reflected integrity beyond expectation. Nathan looked at it for a moment before carefully closing the lid again. "I appreciate the kindness, but I would rather see the recognition shared with the entire maintenance and security staff. Every clean hallway, every working light, every unlocked emergency exit exists because people nobody notices choose to care every single day." Claire felt her eyes soften. "That sounds exactly like something you would say." 1 week later, the company gathered in the main lobby for a brief employee appreciation ceremony. Instead of presenting the award to one individual, Claire surprised everyone by recognizing every member of the maintenance, housekeeping, engineering, and security departments. She spoke about dignity, quiet service, and the unseen people whose work allowed everyone else to succeed. Employees who had once walked past Nathan without a second glance now applauded with genuine respect. Several quietly apologized for careless words spoken weeks earlier. Nathan accepted every apology with the same calm grace he had shown before they were offered. Holding resentment had never been part of the life he wanted for himself or for Lily. That afternoon, Nathan picked up his daughter from school, as always. Lily climbed into the truck carrying another science project and noticed the applause video that someone had posted online. "Everyone at work knows about you now," she said proudly. Nathan smiled while starting the engine. "I hope they remember the lesson more than they remember me." Lily looked out the window for a moment before asking, "What lesson?" Nathan answered without hesitation, "That the person cleaning the floor deserves the same respect as the person sitting in the corner office." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "I think that is a really good lesson." Months passed, and Montgomery Dynamics quietly introduced a scholarship supporting children of maintenance workers, custodians, and first responders, naming the program not after Nathan, but after the principle he had demonstrated every day without asking for recognition. Claire and Nathan remained close friends, united by mutual respect rather than status. She often sought his perspective before making difficult decisions because she had learned that wisdom did not always arrive wearing an expensive suit. Nathan continued working until Lily graduated, choosing the simple life that allowed him to be present for every important moment in her childhood. Some people still knew him only as the quiet janitor who greeted everyone with kindness. Others remembered him as a decorated veteran whose past inspired admiration. Nathan preferred neither description. The title he treasured most was simply Lily's father. And in the end, the greatest victory was never that people discovered who he had once been. It was that they finally learned to value people for who they quietly chose to be every single day.